Friday morning to do another cuppa with Janine and Jenni. And so thanks for listening. And how are you going, Janine?
I'm really well. I'm really well. It's been a really busy week. It's been so busy I didn't bring my cup of tea to my desk.
Oh, you must be under the pump.
I'm really under the pump. What are you drinking this afternoon in this happy hour?
Today I'm just having a nice chamomile today, just to relax. And my lovely new mug, and thank you to a friend who with my emblem on it. So, so that's really nice. So,
and what's the significance of the mushroom behind you today?
Well, today I thought I'd put this up because we're having a big chat about a couple of famous authors in the 19th century, 1800s, when we did that lovely video about Neptune, discovery of Neptune in the 1800s. And I thought, well, you know what, I'll follow this up. And I came across a couple of authors that everyone knows that have a lot of occult in their writing. So I thought it'd be really interesting. And one of them would have, one of them would have a lot of toadstools in his story. So that will give people a clue.
Yes, and these two authors that you've chosen really had their heyday in that around the 1840s, 50s and 60s, which is exactly when Neptune was discovered.
Correct. That's when they came to the fore, and they were really dominant in fictional writing at that time with an occult leaning. So I just thought it might be interesting for people to see their books in a different manner.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start. So what I wanted to talk to you about, I was very interested in Emma Harding Britten before. I've done talks on her before, and she was involved with the Orphic Circle in London. Now, the Orphic Circle was a secret society started in about 1830, and it was trying to shape political life in London at the time. And it was actually formed by astrologers and magicians.
Oh.
And so once the founding members started to pass away, new members came in and turned it into more metaphysical leanings, right? And one of the things that they did, they held most of the meetings in a cottage near the banks of the Thames in London. And under this property, there were tunnels and caves. So they they went down to a cave underground. And in this cave, it was really atmospheric, as you can imagine. They had candles, they had Egyptian artifacts, because, you know, in those days they could get them out of Egypt. A lot of them went to England. And so they're full of Egyptian artifacts and candles, and this is where they did their work. Now, what they did, they collected quite a number of children aged from 10 to 17 to use them in trance mediumship.
Oh,
and so they put the kids down there, nearly all girls, right? And what they did is they were very heavily into mesmerism at that time, which is hypnotism today. And these children were gifted at that time when Neptune came in and it exploded. These were gifted children, and they were able to go into very deep trance, and they used occult symbols and atmosphere and mesmerism to do this. And Emma Harding was a gifted child. She was a virtuoso, so she could sit at a piano without learning and play any piece of music that people wanted. So she played for free at a friend's piano store and entertained his customers on a Saturday, and she started to gather a crowd because there was nothing she couldn't play. She'd be classed as a genius today. And really what it was that she had someone from the spirit world play through her. So she got noticed, and then she was taken into this Orphic Circle, and her father was a member of the Orphic Circle, so they took her in there, and she was separated from all the children and kept separate and used because they considered her the greatest trance medium they've ever met. So she gave them information from the higher spirit realms that they were able to use politically and things like this. And they pursued her that much and kept her engaged in this stuff so much that she nearly had a nervous breakdown. And so at 17, they put her into as a pianist in a traveling drama society, and that's how she ended up in going to America, because she'd been doing it since she was 10 intensively, and they basically burnt her out. So that's Emma's. So I thought this was really interesting to go and have a look at some of the members, and guess what I found? I found that some of them, there's 2 members that were dominant there. The first one we want to talk about is Charles Dickens, and the second one was Lewis Carroll, who did Alice in Wonderland, hence, where am I? Hence the toadstool. So I thought we'd look at Charles Dickens first.
Yeah, so fantastic. I got to say, Jennifer, you're in the wrong century, aren't you?
I am. I'm in the wrong century. So Charles Dickens was one of the greatest writers we've ever known, and he was also a talented magician. And fascinated with spiritualism and ghosts. And, you know, the interesting thing about Charles Dickens, he denied spiritualism his whole life, said they were frauds, but in private, he practiced it. And he was also convinced that he could heal other people through hypnotism. He was convinced he was a healer. And he was a member of the Orphic Circle, and he also started the Ghosts Club in Cambridge University in 1862, of which Lewis Carroll was also a member, and the guy who wrote Sherlock Holmes, Conan Doyle.
Ghost Club, did you say?
Yep, Ghost Club.
Funny, a ghost club.
Yep. Christmas Carol, he wrote Christmas Carol, which is the one I wanted to have a quick look at. And, you know, it's never been out of print for 180 years. And he was the first writer to employ supernatural and to convey a moral message in his fiction writing.
Really?
Interesting, isn't it?
Morals.
And so, so I just want to go through the Christmas Carol a little bit. So with the Christmas Carol, the Scrooge is visited by the ghost of Christmas past, where he has a ghost that has all this light shining out from him, and Scrooge tries to put the cap on the top of his head to stop the light because the light's so bright, and he couldn't hide the light, and it came as an unbroken light upon the ground. Okay. And so the moral of the story is, and I'll quote from Dickens, "There's no more can a man extinguish the light, however hard he may try." So how's that? How esoteric is that?
Really?
So now we can look at it and go, oh my God, you know, he's talking about the soul's light through the body. You can't extinguish it even by putting a cap over the crown chakra and trying to block the light. You can't do it. It will still spill out, right?
And like we said, you know, in the last video about Neptune, the idea of spirituality was not about souls and light emanating and transcendental experiences at all until this time. It was much more, you know, was more realistic. People were not talking about souls at all.
Well, they were in Christianity, but more in a plotting, controlling manner, patriarchal manner.
You're just told what your soul is. You don't have an experience of soul until this period of time.
Yeah, and it's not opened up people's minds to what a soul is. It's light, which is very true. So going back to Marley's ghost, so when Marley came, Scrooge said, "You're fettered," because he had chains around him. And I'll just quote here. And he said, "Tell me why." Marley replies, "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on my own free will, and of my free will I wore it. So it's about karma. It's about every lifetime we make a link in the chain, and we are either fettered by it or freed by it. So it's about how we live each life and what we reap, what we sow. And so each lifetime we have to undo that link if it wasn't a good one, or learn those lessons. Amazing. What a great way to put it, to teach people.
Incredible.
And in the second one, Scrooge is showing, second ghost, Scrooge is shown two children clinging to this ghost. And I'll quote here, it says, when Scrooge says, who are these children? And the spirit says, they're man's, and they cling to me, appealing from their fathers. This boy is ignorance, and this girl is want. Beware them both, and all of their degree, but most of all, beware this boy, for on his brow I see written, which is doom, unless the writing be erased. They're saying in occult science, they're saying to be called ignorant is to be unkind, called a racist is to be terrible. But what people don't understand is the boy was most significant because he was doomed to his ignorance. So it's ignorance in occult science that's the biggest sin, because it's through ignorance you do all these things because you're ignorant. And that then leads to lies and racism and, you know, sexism and all this stuff that we have, wars, all that sort of stuff, because of ignorance. And that's the biggest sin. And I thought that was really interesting. And the final lesson came from the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, and that was charity. And he never spoke at all. And he just showed by his deeds what you reap, you know. And so that's how he showed some occult lessons in that. And so Charles Dickens was fascinated by occultism, and he was a genius of evoking eerie and atmospheric and powerful and malign characters. And there was no spine-chilling books around at that time, and it really boosted circulation of his books. And in 1861, this is the last thing I want to talk about. In 1861, he had this magazine, and he wrote a story. He wrote some ghost stories, right, just in his magazine. And he wrote this story about a young woman who goes to a portrait painter, right? And he goes to this portrait painter, and she says to him, you saw me many months ago. In a couple of months' time, I want you to draw my picture. Will you remember my face? And the artist was very puzzled, and he said he'd prefer conventional settings. And she said, it's impossible, cannot be. Can you do it just by remembering my face? And what transpired in the story was that she was already dead, and the painter was speaking to a ghost. And the portrait was needed to console her father, who was grieving her death. But there's a twist to the story. So Charles Dickens prints this, right? And another person who is a painter wants to sue him, because that's his story that he wrote, unbeknownst to Charles Dickens. And he, you know, the reason why he wrote it? Because it truly happened to him. That a female ghost came to him and asked him to draw her portrait for her father.
You know what's fascinating about that? We talked about Charles Darwin briefly in our Neptune talk, and that was about 1852. Charles Darwin came out with the theory of evolution. But a year before, someone else came out with the same theory. I can't remember his name. Oh,
really?
And the big drama for him, and this must have happened at the same time, you know, in 1850s. Yep. Big drama for Charles Darwin was they had a legal battle over it. Who had the theory who had the theory first, and who owned that intellectual property. Yeah. And what can you say about that? Maybe the spirit gave them the same information at the same time.
Yeah, well, spirit, you know, that happened to Marconi as well. You know, when Marconi invented the telephone, Also, Tesla had already had something of it, and some other people around the world also invented it around the same time. So who came first? And Spirit have always said that in the atmosphere, there's like a encyclopedia of ideas that are invented in the spirit world that are handed to Earth. And some people will pick it up and some people won't. And obviously, you can pick up this idea at the same time.
Yeah,
right?
it's fascinating.
And
it's fascinating. Also the zeitgeist, you know.
Yeah, and even Charles Dickens was so amazed that he wrote the story as a piece of fiction, and actually a painter had written the story to publish 12 months later near Christmas. And it's exactly a true story, what happened.
So it's a channeled piece of information.
I think so. I think he would have sat there and wrote it, and these thoughts came in and wrote it, and someone had written through him, I would say. But I just thought it's an amazing, showcase of how the spirit world operate, and the fact that he was one of the first writers to bring this into popular fiction at the time, which I didn't know.
Yeah. Fascinating. We use the term now in spiritual psychological life, the term downloading.
Yes.
Well, when they discovered Neptune, all these downloads were possible.
Yeah, that's right.
People were just downloading stuff that was falling out of the heavens.
It's so fascinating to me that a planet, it's us becoming conscious of an energy of a planet, because I'm sure that planet would have hit us before. It doesn't suddenly hit us, but it's us becoming conscious of that.
Consciousness.
Oh, man.
More consciousness.
It just goes to show.
As soon as you become conscious of an energy, you become it.
Yes. It's so amazing. It becomes real, doesn't it?
It's real.
So I thought that was really interesting about Charles Dickens. He came from poverty. He worked in a shoe polish factory and worked his way. He married a woman, treated her terribly. They had umpteen pregnancies, only 10 children lived. He left her for another woman that he was trying to heal, all this sort of stuff. There's a whole life to him that wasn't so good, but he had this extraordinary mind. So I thought you might like to talk about his chart for us.
Okay, well, I intentionally didn't do a big study of Charles Dickens, but I did have a quick look. So let's have a look at his chart.
Because you wouldn't have the time, would you?
Well, if I start reading about it, I'll start to
okay.
Yeah, sometimes it's best not to look at it too much. So what really struck me here is, first of all, his rising sign is Virgo. Virgo rules workers, right?
Yeah.
Virgo rules work generally, and usually hard work. So people who have Virgo rising are designed for hard work and hard yakka, and they don't get many blessings in life. So he naturally has an affinity with the working class. Okay.
Yeah. He wrote, he wrote, what's that other one that he wrote about, the Oliver Twist, didn't he?
Oliver Twist. Yeah. And I mean, even Great Expectations is about the class system.
Yes, it did too.
Virgo rising people are happy to get down into and do the dirty work. Do the dirty work that no one wants to do. It's also quite a skeptical, analytical sign.
And he was.
So it's not going to just, embrace transcendental ideas by personality. So, Virgo rising stuck in the world of reality, and it's usually the hard world of work. Makes them good workers, though. The other interesting thing is he's got his South node here. See, in the 6th house, it's the house of work, and it's also at the house of reality. It's the daily grind, the 6th house. It's feeding yourself, cleaning your house, paying your rent, paying your debtors. Yep. Doing all that sort of thing. It's also the house of debt. It's the house of discrimination, the trade, the unions, all of this stuff going on in here. And his South node is here in Pisces. So South node is what you came into the world believing,
Yeah.
and you try and live it out. So he came into the world thinking you just got to work your guts out and, you know, do the daily grind, and you know, this is a house of shopkeepers and street vendors and things like that.
Yeah.
So he probably had very humble aspirations early in life.
He did.
And also South Node in Pisces, I have found, have been quite lost in their early years, lost, persecuted, damaged, abused.
Yep.
So not a good early start for somebody, I suspect. Also, his North Node is over here in the 12th house, and as we know, the 12th house is a very spiritual house.
Yep.
So when your North Node's in the 12th house, you come into spirituality in the second half of your life. Yep. You weren't born interested in spirituality, it developed. So he was probably a young skeptic, and as he matured, started to get into more...
That would fit in. That would fit in because he became a magician later in life, and when mesmerism came in, that was it for him.
So I'd say in terms of his lifetimes and karma, this interest in spirituality was only of that lifetime. He didn't come into the world with any belief about it. There's nothing up here in the 9th house about his relationship with God and religion. So I'd say it came in later in life, usually in his, well, relative to how long people lived as Victorians, but I'd say middle years would have been 35 and beyond. Yeah. It's in the sign of Virgo, which means that he might have been very analytical about this subject. So he might have started to get into the occult, but really pulled it apart and analysed it and put it under scrutiny just to see if it was true, you know, because Virgo can be quite scientific. Yeah. So he might have wanted to know the science all about that. His sun is in Aquarius, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but when your sun is in the 5th house, you are blessed with creative intelligence. Right. So you have an infinite supply of creative ideas, and you constantly want to create. Right. It's a fantastic place for the sun. The sun just wants to be a creator of anything. Now, when it's in Aquarius, you want to be the creator of original ideas. And I've noticed that in Charles Dickens' chart and Lewis Carroll, they're both Sun Aquarius. Oh. Now, they're both Sun Aquarius. You pluck these two out and you found these two interesting. Well, they're both Sun Aquarius.
That's amazing.
They're both Moon Sagittarians. Oh, so they have quite a lot in common. The odds are extraordinary.
Wow. Wow,
now,
that's amazing.
What's the purpose of being a Sun Aquarius? It's really to dabble into unknown territory and take us into the future. So it's a futuristic sign. So when you've got Sun in Aquarius and you've got lots of creative ideas, you have the potential to create ideas for the future. Now, it's fascinating to me that both authors are still current today. I mean, Great Expectations is one of my favourite films ever. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we all know Alice in Wonderland's been a huge success in Hollywood. Huge. So these people are futuristic. They have a vision into the future, and their duty is to take us there. Mm. Now, in Charles Dickens' case, his creative thought processes created a volume of fiction that introduced us into the future. Even though he wasn't futuristic in the topic, the themes seem to be everlasting, don't they? Yeah. I mean, and also, you know, Aquarians are the revolutionaries in astrology. That's right. And he had a very quiet working class revolution going on with his very. And, you know, he was a great skeptic, as I said, of spiritualism. And, you know, he was a magician as well. So he was quite well known as a magician. Where's that in the chart? The 5th house is also not just creative thought, but it's the house of performance.
Oh, okay.
and your ability to put on a show, right? So as you know, I'm a big fan of Dynamo. He's got his house, he's got his son in the 5th house too.
Oh, okay.
You know, they love to perform and show their creative talent either on a stage or show it to the world. It's a show off area. He's got his moon in Sagittarius, like Lewis Carroll. What does that mean? Deep down, he has a very rebellious nature. So all moon Sagittarius, they want to buck the system.
Yeah.
They want free reign and they want to explore. So this is a very adventurous moon. So deep down, he was prepared to, you know, experiment, try new things. It's the sign of the hipster, Sagittarius. So between being a sun Aquarius and a moon Sagittarius, you can't control this person.
No,
you can't control them.
He was apparently a bit difficult. You know, you liked him or you didn't. And he had absolutely no luck at all, really. Even when he, you know, went to court for plagiarism or copyright, and he was in his rights and he won the court case, he still had to pay all the costs. So he just never got a break.
I also think Saturn in the 4th house is a lot of hardship growing up.
Okay, yeah.
Especially from the mother, like a hard upbringing with lots of discipline. But moon in the 3rd, you know, his great emotional release would have been writing, because the 3rd house is writing. Okay. So he would have found all of this emotional expression about being rebellious and wild and philosophical through his writing. He's got Uranus in the house of writing, so he was writing quite radical things. And Neptune is the great downloading planet. So he was downloading spiritual information into his writing. He's also got the Arabic part of fortune here, which is not a planet, it's a point, which means you're going to get your fortune anywhere, it will be writing.
Writing. Wow.
Writing and communication. So there's quite a lot going on in the area of writing.
Right.
Okay. So he must have been a prolific writer, not just produced some bestsellers, but he must have been prolific, and he must have just gone, I've got inspiration coming. Here we go.
Yeah. Well, he had his own magazine to put all his short stories in and things like that.
Yeah. But what makes him well known is Jupiter in the 10th.
Okay.
So Jupiter is where we have our luck, and 10th house is career. It's as simple as that. He had a lucky career sign. Okay. There were probably a lot of that.
So he
would be in his professional life.
So it was meant to be, Janine.
I think so. You can do no wrong in your profession when you're blessed with Jupiter there.
Okay.
But, you know, a lot of working class themes here, themes of hardship, because he really understood hardship. He had a hard upbringing. He understood hard work. Poverty. He was fighting the class system with all this oppression going on here.
Correct.
So that's really interesting. Pluto and Venus together on the point of relationship is, you wouldn't want it in your chart. That means he's got a lot of very intense karma for relationships, but that's another story.
Yep. Wow, fascinating.
So how's that?
So that all fits in perfectly, doesn't it?
I think so. And you'll see the charts are quite different in the case of Lewis Carroll. So you can be Aquarians, Sun Aquarians, and be, you know, futuristic and radical, but have completely different charts. So we'll have a look at that once you talk about Lewis Carroll.
All right. Well, that was so fascinating. And how does that confirm? So we really should talk about fate one day, shouldn't we?
Fate and luck.
Yeah, because, you know, man, you just sometimes you got to think it's all written in the stars and it's done, mate. How you get there is how you get there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that. So what I'm going to do now is talk about Lewis Carroll. So, you know, Lewis, his real name was Charles Dodgson.
Yeah.
Dodgson. And he was ordained a deacon of the Church of England. Do you know that? Mm. And he suffered with a stutter, Lewis Carroll, and he was psychic from birth. And he had many experience dealing with spiritual visitors in his youth, right? And he, most of all, Lewis Carroll and Charles Dickens met at the University of Cambridge. And Lewis Carroll was a renowned mathematician, renowned. And he wrote a book on maths, how to enter the fourth dimension. How radical is that in that time, in mathematics? And he incorporated a lot of mathematical theories in Alice in Wonderland, which we're going to talk about today. So Alice in Wonderland was published in 1865. And I've got a lot of notes here on it. And so I thought what I'd do is just go through some of the things. There's so much in Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. It's so esoteric. It reminded me a little bit of the Bible a bit, in that, you know, you can take the Bible literally, which a lot of churches do, but it actually wasn't written for that. It was written in an esoteric language. So you've got to see behind the allegory of it. And Alice in Wonderland's the same, right? It's a whole journey about evolvement of the soul. And so I just want to go through some of that. It starts with Alice the day before she was getting married, and she runs away and she goes out into the garden and then goes down the rabbit hole. And so that's about, you know how people have OBEs and out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, they go down through that tunnel. So that's what that is, right? About her leaving a body and having this dream. So what's reality, right? And we have the man who wrote this, who was well versed in science and mathematics. You've got to understand this. And he was also a member of the Society for Psychical Research, where he explored thought transference and mind reading. So this reminds you of the caterpillar that Alice comes across with this toadstool, and Alice asks the question about eating the mushrooms, and the caterpillar gives her answers because he's read her mind anyway, right? And we can hear the White Queen telling us that she can remember future events. And so this is an example of divination, you know, fortune telling about future. And the interesting thing about Carroll, that in his library, his whole library was filled with books about supernatural, ghosts, miracles, black arts, mediums, confessions of mediums. His diary was filled with hints of magic and supernatural works, which I didn't know about. So there you go. And also in Alice Through the Looking Glass, she plays with a black and white kitten. So that's about the left path and the right path in Masonry. And also she comes across a checkerboard where the Queen lives, and that's also about initiation into Masonry. Masonry is used the chessboard on the floor as part of their initiation rites, right? Yep. Now, I also want to tell you the most interesting thing about this is that the real Alice, they say, is Alice Liddell, which was a family he knew, had all these girls, but actually the real Alice was Emma Harding.
Oh, wow.
And Alice means truth. Right? So you think about it. Emma Harding was the person that he went to that cave and listened while she brought the underworld or the spirit world through, and he based it on her, because remember, she was only 10 years of age. So it wasn't, everyone says it's that Alice Little, right, which was the family, but it wasn't. It was Emma Harding Britton that he based it on, which makes sense to me, right? Because she did all that work. It just goes on and on and on. So I just wanted people to understand that this man was a genius.
Do you
Absolute
think
genius.
he did this consciously, the meticulous nature of all the symbolism? Was it conscious, or was he not conscious, he just did it?
He knew it. He
knew, he planned it all out.
Gifted.
You know, it reminds me a lot of, you know, I never really thought about this, but Alice in Wonderland was the Harry Potter of the generation, wasn't it?
Correct.
And I was thinking about J.K. Rowling did very similar things with all her symbolism. She studied history. She mashed everything into a collage like that.
Yeah, she did. And J.K. Rowling's got most of the Harry Potter story on a train from going back up to Edinburgh, and she said it just rolled out in front of her.
And there's another good topic for us, because she was an astrologer.
She was what?
She was an astrologer.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that. Interesting to look at his chart.
All right. Let's do that. Here we go. Okay. So,
very different.
First thought I had was how similar his chart is to Ron Hubbard.
Oh, really?
Sagittarius rising, with a lot of very similar things. And of course, Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, that's really where his talent lied: philosophy, intellectualism, and you know, psychology and all that sort of thing. So Sagittarius rising, these are people that are naturally philosophic. He's actually got his moon. His moon is 3 degrees Sagittarius, and this is not a good chart visually, but it's actually on the rising sign. So if we got rid of that ascendant sign, the moon would literally be right on the most important point of the chart, which is your ascendant at 9 o'clock. So not only is he Sagittarius rising, moon in Sag, they're right on top of each other. It's a big double whammy of Sagittariusness. Right. So Sagittarians are, in a modern sense, publishers, right?
Okay.
So they are writers, publishers, philosophers. They're intellectuals. They're people who want to think big. You know, they don't think detail like scientists. They think big. They've got big ideas. They're the big geniuses of the world. You and I have a psychic friend who's got her own publishing company. Yeah. She's Sagittarius rising too. It's also the sign of the entrepreneur, the sign of the evangelist as well. Right. You know, evangelists have strong Sagittarius. But the moon on the ascendant's fascinating. The moon is the subconscious. And the moon is sort of like our emotional center, and it's right on the ascendant, which means this man cannot stop his subconscious emotional life from coming out. It's oozing. He's an open book. This man is open to all of the contents of his unconscious, which means he's just a walking antenna. He's just tapping into the collective all the time. I know a couple of clients like this, and they are trippers. Yeah. They have no sort of boundaries in that they can't contain themselves. They're just open all the time, and they're moody.
Yeah, they would be. Yeah.
Feelings all the time, and they love to tell you about them. Interesting, the moon is the mother as well, so these people have mothering capacity. Now, in the context of liking children, you know, I wonder if he had a strong parental feeling towards children. I know that's not how it was written, but I'm just thinking how this might play out.
that's interesting you say that, because his friend said he did not have an unhealthy interest in children, but he did take nude photos of a couple of the girls. So
which
you
I
have to
believe
wonder. You have to wonder.
Quite common in Victorian times to have children scantily dressed in photographs and paintings, and off the
yeah. Well, his friends
maintain.
Yeah, well, his friends maintain that he did not have an unhealthy interest, but you know, it's. I guess today he'd be pretty suspicious doing that.
He would. He also might have been gay, but had a real interest in perhaps being a mother or a father, or, you know, having fascination with children might have just come from being naturally parental.
Yes.
I don't know. And he was also a sun in Aquarius, just like Charles Dickens, as we said. So he was always going to be progressive in this lifetime. He was always going to push us into the future. He has a moon Sagittarius, so he's a rebel. He's counterculture. He's into anything where he can buck the system. So they bucked different systems, probably. I guess what makes him a little bit unusual in that he's got his South Node in the second house, which is all about money. He may have come from wealth. I don't know. Do you know if he's come from wealth?
I think it was, he wasn't like Charles Dickens, who came from complete poverty. He did come, what would we call upper middle class, so comfortable. He was able to be an academic and do his degree at Cambridge University quite easily. He became a deacon, which a lot of the upper middle class did, for something to do. So I would say he was comfortably off. Yeah.
His North Node is in Leo, and North Node in Leo is all about following the creative path in life. So I'd say he got more creative as he got older, and it came on thick and fast. And the 8th house is also the subconscious. It's also the house of the occult, deep-rooted psychology, sexuality, all sorts of things. So this is a man who may have developed his fascination with his own creativity in the second half of his life.
Yeah.
First half of his life in the second house might have been much more pragmatic, scientific. He might have,
which it was, maths.
Might have been much more about science and maths and all of that. And then second half of his life, he got right into the occult and creative ideas around psychology.
Yep.
His 9th house Saturn, it can mean two things. One is you've come from quite a strict academic background, so you might have had a proper education, you know, like a proper university education, and it can also mean you were forced into that education. You didn't really want to. So I don't know if he was made to do mathematics, because it's in the analytical sign of Virgo, but I get the feeling here that he may not have wanted that education that he got, but it was part of his like parental obligation to study mathematics or something. But it's certainly not a growth area for him. So he may have grown up very scientific and mathematic, went to university, but his path was really the creative path. North Node in Leo. And Leo is all about self-expression and being original. So he was the maker of a lot of original thought, wasn't he? I mean, nobody produced anything like that.
Oh, no, it's just brilliant. And his psychic ability as a child, that would have come from his 12th house moon, would it?
Well, moon on the ascendant.
Yeah.
Mm. He's just totally in touch with his feelings and his unconscious processes.
Okay.
And it gives you a great imagination. Gives you the ability to go into your unconscious and fish out, you know, amazing things.
Well, you know, what a mind.
Collective, and you're just open. You don't see the ascendant is all about your the mask that you wear.
Yeah.
And the ego that you have, your persona that you put on. Well, he didn't have one.
No.
So it was all stripped off. So he was quite naked himself as a personality, and just raw, probably wore his heart on his sleeve, didn't cover himself up in any way. He probably just walked into a room and said, I feel this and I feel that.
Yep.
Know what I mean?
Yeah. He would have been very clairsentient, I suppose.
Yeah, very sensitive to his environment.
Just such a brilliant. So does his mind, his intelligence come into his chart? Because I think he must have had a brilliant mind.
Well, yes, he's got quite a lot in the second house here. Okay. So he's got 4 planets in the second house. And I think the brilliance you're talking about, well, actually, there's 2 aspects to this. He would have been very good at understanding the natural world, and that's science, physics, and things like that. But Jupiter in the 3rd house is the mind, and Jupiter is expansion.
Okay.
So he's got like unlimited thoughts going on. You know, he can expand his mind right out to be the size of a planet. People are very blessed to have Jupiter in the 3rd. It makes them very brilliant. But it's also the house of writing. So we've been talking about, you know, where Jupiter's placed in your chart, and his luck is in the area of writing. So he's blessed.
That worked.
And had prodigious writing talent.
Yeah.
So both of them are have well-placed Jupiters for being well-known writers.
Yeah. Oh, so fascinating, isn't it? Just proves that astrology can really point you in the right direction, can't it?
Yeah. And interesting how one of them was psychic and one of them wasn't.
Yes.
But one of them had an interest in psychic work, but was not naturally psychic.
No, he just explored it through magic, really, which led him into the occultism.
Yeah.
And, you know, he didn't really see ghosts. Charles Dickens didn't really see, but he met all these children or met all these magicians, and it's just fascinating. And yet Lewis Carroll was able to see from childhood.
Yeah, well, maybe Lewis Carroll was a big child.
Maybe he was. Maybe he just went into himself and went into that magical world that his brain took him into.
Looking at that, I'd say he was always in it. He didn't have an awakening or anything. He was just always
he was born that way.
Children are so close to their subconscious.
Yeah, they are.
All the time.
Yeah.
He probably never came out of it.
Wow. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Great era. And once again, Jennifer, you're definitely in the wrong era.
I'm in the wrong era. I'm in this dry era. It's not fair.
As I've said before, you know, the 1990s were sort of some sort of a new age away, but it doesn't compare with what they were doing back then.
No comparison, which is why when we did the video on Aquarius, it was really important to me, because, you know, a lot of people say we're going to ascend and do this and do that, and I think they're going to be sorely disappointed. Because in my experience, you don't ascend to anything without a lot of hard work. And I think the Christmas Carol shows you that. The chains of the ghost, link by link, is what you do each lifetime that builds you to that next level. And there's no shortcuts. I don't think there's any shortcuts. So it's just the way it is. Well, thank you very much, my dear. That's really great. Really enjoyed that chat, and I'm sorry I got a bit down into Lewis's because it's just
Down
so
in the
hard to
rabbit
put it together. You know, he's such this great mind, and to put all this symbolism together in one little book. Wow, man, it just blew my mind.
Okay, well, let's leave it at that. Thank you very much for what a fantastic conversation, and very well researched, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. And I look forward to next Friday. Enjoy your week and have a rest.
See ya.
See ya.